Hello and welcome to this video. I get a regular comment on my channel recently. It's a regular one. And it's not the same person, it's different people. And they keep telling me that I need to go and check out The Warning. Andy, you need to check out The Warning. They're this Mexican band. These three girl sisters. Sisters are usually girls, aren't they? I didn't need to put that bit in. These three sisters from Mexico. They've got this band, The Warning, go and check them out. So, I'll go. First time I read it, I thought, okay, and I checked them out. I think I'd had about 3 comments. I didn't do it straight away, but because it kept getting repeated. I thought, well, obviously they want me to look at this band. So I checked them out. I thought, yeah, they're okay. But then the comments still kept coming. And these people, these Warning fans, are going, did you check them out? What do you think? What do you think? I went, yeah, all right. A bit, no. What album did you listen to? Oh, I listened to so-and-so. Oh, no, you should listen to that album. You've got to listen to this album. Go and check out this album. I'm thinking, well, if you're having to pick and choose albums, that's not very good. If a band's good, you should be able to go and pick any album, really, and get some idea. I know that's not always the case, but once you start picking and choosing, no, listen to that. So this really odd, just really odd phenomenon that emerged on my channel. And it's kept going on. And one guy, we've had quite a long conversation about The Warning. And it gave me so much sort of material for a video, really about the psychology of certain viewers of this channel or music fans of a certain age. So I've decided to make a video about The Warning, and that's what this is going to be about. So where do we start? First thing, The Warning. They're a Mexican band. They're girls and they're sisters. Again, I never needed to say the girls bit because sisters are always girls, but they're 3 sisters, right? They're quite attractive looking girls, in their 20s. They're cool. They play sort of rock music. It's not Napalm Death, but it's not Bon Jovi. It's sort of, power chordy rock music. It's very competent, they know what they're doing, I suppose. They got famous by a route which is different to their heroes' routes. Their heroes are bands like Metallica. And Metallica, around about, they're older than me, but they would have come through the route that I came through, which was, you had some mates, you're into metal, you want to form a band, you find out your mate plays guitar and you play the drums, so you go up to your mate and say, do you want to play bass? You talk them into playing bass, and you go to some extrovert bloke that the girls like and you say, do you want to sing? It doesn't matter whether they can sing or not, that doesn't matter. And then you go into sort of a rehearsal room somewhere if you can afford it, but you probably end up sitting in a garage with towels all over your instruments or over your drums, and you write some songs hoping that you could get a deal, and you might get a deal, and that was the route, Well, you formed a band, basically. That's not the route The Warning came up. Apparently, they formed a band by playing Guitar Hero. Now, Guitar Hero, or it might be that other band, Rock Band. I think it could have been Rock Band, but it was one of those computer games that were all the rage a few years ago. Now, I have played Guitar Hero, and I'll describe what it's like. It's like you sit there, you literally sit there on your settee, and you've got a little plastic guitar, which is about 2 foot long, right? So you sat there like this with a little plastic, and it's got some buttons up here. And then you put the game on, and it's like you're driving down a road, which is a guitar neck. Right? And there's obstacles coming forward on the road, and you don't miss the obstacles. You have to drive into these little obstacles with these buttons. And by twiddling the buttons in such a way, it's like you were oh, God. Oh, is this a good idea, this video? Should I keep going with it? You twiddle the buttons, and whilst listening to YYZ by Rush, or I don't know, Don't Fear the Reaper, or some awful Neil Young song. It's not just metal songs; it's all sorts of different songs. And if you hit all the obstacles in time to the music, This gives you the feeling of being a guitar hero or in a rock band, depending on what game you're in. Now, I have been in a rock band, and when I played it, I thought, I'm not getting the actual feeling of being in a rock band playing this. But the rest of my family, they think that they are having that feeling by doing this, which is very interesting. But, so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, whatever makes you happy, that's what I say. If you like playing it, that's great. Nothing wrong with it, is there? So they started playing all this rock, you know, they really got it into, so they had their idea of forming their rock band amongst themselves. So they must have gone, well, you play pretend guitar and you're playing pretend drums, so why don't we get the real ones? And obviously they had a family that could then afford to go out and buy all the instruments and a recording studio and all that type of thing that is de rigueur nowadays for any band that's actually made it anywhere. So they start playing their songs. Now, of course, the next thing is they don't write their own songs. No. What they do is they start doing cover versions and sticking it up on the internet. This is the new way, you see. And they do a Metallica song. And it's probably one off the Black Album. It won't be Leper Messiah. They probably did one of those. And they stick that on the net. And, of course, Metallica noticed it when they would, wouldn't they? Because by this point, you know, Metallica, that had come out of the new wave of British heavy metal in the early 80s, you know, and now they're now millionaire granddads, aren't they? Millionaire granddads. And they see some young girls, attractive girls, playing their song, and of course they're going to share it. Obviously, if I'd have got my mates together, right, we could do a pretty good version of a Metallica song, you know, that would be quite fun. If we all came down here, all my middle-aged mates, and we played a good version of it and videoed it, stuck it on the internet, it's not going to do any good, is it? Metallica aren't going to share that. They're not going to go, look at these old blokes here doing a song by us old blokes. No. Metallica want to share the young girls playing their song, you know. So, of course, Metallica share it, and then they're famous. And they have a huge following. If Metallica decide to share this video, which they won't, but if they did, then I'd be famous. All right? That's the way the music industry works. So now they're famous, so they get a record deal, they start putting these albums out. And these albums that I have listened to are... Now, I'm going to try and describe it without being sarcastic, sorry. Or sort of having this cloaked, derogatory thing going on. Passive-aggressive, cloaked, you know, hate. It's cliched. Okay? They're not doing anything that nobody was doing millions of years ago in rock music. It's not... got any aspect of it from modern technology or other influences from modern music, except for the sort of Pro Tool perfection that has been, you know, inflicted on their performances. But the thing for me, I think the reason why I'm not so keen on it is that there's a big difference between them and Metallica. Metallica wrote riffs, and I love riffs. And riffs are a big thing. And then after Metallica, we had... like all those grunge bands, and Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, even Nirvana, they would write a riff. Down, that's a riff, right? Then you had these bands like, you know, Blink-182, the ones who did American Idiot, forgot what they're called, Offspring, and there's this punk rock, modern punk American rock. I hated that because there was no riffs. It was just power chords. You know, it was just chunky power chords, no riffs, straight drum beats. It didn't have all the drama of metal. And then that, if you take, but at least they were punky. At least there was some fun and aggression to them. But if you take that and bland that approach out, that's what you've got with The Warning. But that's no problem. You know, people like them. But that's how they seem to me. There's no riffs. There's no cool drum beats. There's nothing in there that's going to, you know, it's very, very generic. Now, I wonder why my audience, which is obviously quite middle-aged, that grew up with these classic rock bands, that I think, why do they like The Warning? And I think what it is you get to a certain age and you like your rock music, and you feel like the world's changed, And you put the radio on and it's all this computerized stuff and it's all blip, blip, blip and people shaking their bottoms about and saying rude and disgusting things, you know, and all that thing. And you don't like that and you feel like the world's gone wrong and nobody plays any instruments anymore. And then you see what seems like some lovely young girls that don't deserve my derision, putting on a guitar and playing some proper rock music and rocking out. And they rock. And they see a hope. Maybe there's a chink of light in the darkness. Maybe there's this chink of light with the youth. You know, maybe they are going to bring rock back, the Warning are. You know, I mean, they're from Mexico, aren't they? I mean, what do they listen to in Mexico? Obviously Mexican music, but I don't know. They listen to pop music. Is there, I mean, because the thing is that I know when you go to South America, they're really, like, they still like rock music. There's certain parts in the world where they, like Eastern Europe, they all still like rock music, you know. I mean, if you're in a band that was around in the early 80s, 40 years later, you can just about leach a career by going out and playing Eastern Europe, can't you see? So there's these territories where rock is still just about hanging on. So I don't know whether there's a more of a love in Mexico of the rock music than there is in like the America and the UK. I mean, the UK here, we are very, I mean, Britain is very like, we're far more worried about haircuts than we are about music. You know, I got told that by an Australian once and I thought, he's bloody right, you know. Now, the meat and potatoes of this video, I want to compare The Warning to Metallica. All right? And I want to try and explain the difference between The Warning and Metallica. And in doing that, explain the sort of history of rock music for the last 40 years. And then place The Warning in that context. And then place the listeners in that context. So it all makes sense so we can see how this works. Metallica are one of the biggest bands in the world because they took the new wave of British heavy metal that emerged in the late 70s here in Britain and they sold that to America and then the whole world. So we have to work out what the hell the new wave of British heavy metal was. When I was 12 years old in 1980, I saw on the television two bands. They weren't really new wave of British heavy metal bands, but I thought they were very cool. One was Rainbow, who had brought out a song called All Night Long, and the other one was White Snake, who had a song out called Fall for Your Loving. And when these guys turned up on the television, for some reason, and I really want this to be what this video is about, I think. This is the esoteric, and I don't normally tell you what I want it to be about underneath. But this one's not going that well, really. Because I'm dubious about this video. You could probably tell I'm dubious about this one. And I've turned up to my studio, look, and the electric's off. We had a big storm. There's no electric. So I'm stood here, it's freezing cold. I got no light, telling you lot about The Warning. So, at 12 years old, I heard those two bands. Now, there was something about the guitar riffage that I liked. That riff on All Night Long. Now, there's this idea of heaviness. Heaviness is a thing. It's not like funkiness. It's not like music that makes you happy. It's not like music that makes you sad. Heaviness is, it's rebellious. It's rebellion in sound, isn't it? And you know that when you hear a heavy rock guitar playing and playing a riff, there's something menacing about it, which is like it's like sticking your finger up to the world. Okay? So, in the mid-70s, when punk had come out here in the UK, and obviously in America you had bands like the Ramones, obviously not as good, doing their thing over there, they had distorted guitar, didn't they? That you got to have that for rebellion. And what happened here in the UK after punk was the heavy bands, right? Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath and all that lot. They got a little bit shown up by the punk bands. You know, it's like they're trying to be rebellious, but suddenly they didn't look rebellious because they're all flouncing around with their long hair and they're flouncing around in their like white flowy clothes and being all hippified and doing all that Led Zeppelin thing. And suddenly they didn't seem that dangerous anymore. They just looked like a bunch of old hippies. The punks didn't look like that. They got like studs on them and chains and all this type of thing. And so a lot of the metal bands that still wanted to play heavy rock, heavy metal, influenced by Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, they think, yeah, well, let's do that and let's add a little bit of this punky attitude in it. And there's a number of bands, you know. I would say very important band in doing this would be Judas Priest. Judas Priest were like started off looking all flowy, white roby, you know, hippies and in a sort of Led Zepp style. And then they, you know, especially Rob Halford, because the thing with Rob Halford, he was gay. We didn't know this. How we didn't know this at the time, you know, when he got an album called Hell Bent for Leather. But we didn't know this. But he obviously looked at these punk bands and he saw all the chains and the you know, the leather and all that bit. He thought, I'll have a bit of that, you know. And so you got this coming in through Judas Priest. And then you got bands like Motorhead. I mean, Motorhead, again, Lemmy had been out there playing in Hawkwind, the sort of most stoned hippie band on the planet. But then he rocked it up, didn't he? He got real, he rocked it up. He brought that attitude in. He suddenly got Motorhead. So you got bands like Judas Priest, Motorhead. There's other ones I could go on about as well. And those are the new bands, and they're heavier, they're harder. And so for someone of my age at that point, coming in after punk rock, right, wanting to stick it to the man, wanting to do something rebellious, wanting to buy into something that wasn't what was going on in 1980, which was like new romantic and electro and all that. So I didn't want to like Human League. I wasn't going to like Human League, right? Plus, I got an interest in playing instruments. You know, my dad was a drummer and I'd listen to all this jazz. But I didn't want to really play jazz. I wanted to play my own music, but I wanted to play the drums. And my mate who was playing the guitar, he wanted to play the guitar. And we hear Rainbow, we were like, really cool that. But the thing we liked about it was that heaviness. It was the heaviness. So you start looking for heavier bands. And of course, those bands that were emerging at that time had the same mindset. They wanted to get heavier. Next thing you know, you got Iron Maiden coming out with like their debut album, and then you've got Killers coming out, and you've got bands like Angel Witch, right? And you've got bands like Diamond Head. Now, Diamond Head were literally just up the road from here. I gesture that way. That is not the way to Stourbridge, where they were from. It's actually, Stourbridge is sort of over there, you know. But, you know, they were up the road playing this stuff, and they were bringing in a whole bunch of things because they had a punky attitude. It was fast and aggressive. They had cool riffs, but also they got this prog thing going on. They didn't care. This is the thing about New Wave and British Heavy Metal. No one was trying to be cool. The punks were trying to be cool. New Wave and British Heavy Metal, they weren't trying to be cool. And so I would walk to school with my sort of proto-long hair flapping around my neck. I got my leather jacket on with my denim jacket over the top. I'd got my arms cut off, and I got the patches of all my favourite bands on the back, and I got my badges down the front, you know, and they're all there. Judas Priest, White Snake, Motorhead, you know, and you walk into school with all your mates, and they've got all these haircuts like this because they're all into Visage or whatever, and you're sat there, and you know you don't fit in. You know that if somebody come up to you and said, "Why do you like that music?" You know, I didn't mean to say that. If somebody came up and said, "What music are you into?" and he says, "Well, I'm into Angel Witch." They weren't going, "Never heard of them." "Who else are you into?" "Iron Maiden." "Never heard of them." This music was underground. It was anybody who was a wild-eyed loner, anybody that did not fit in. And I'm talking about not even trendy. The whole thing about the new wave of British heavy metal, it was not trendy. If you were into it, you were like this otherness. You weren't even cool. This was the joy of it. It was the joy of forming a band, coming up with a name that was as satanic as it possibly could be, that was both aggressive but also had the air of the gothic about it. You know, so you sit there thinking, what shall we have? Leper, a vicar with how about vicar with leper? Shall we call that leper vicar? Leper Vicar. Should we? Is that going to work as a band name? Oh, I don't know about it. We need something about the church, though. Well, what do you have in churches? Well, you've got like pews, haven't you? Now, pew. You can't have that as a band name. Okay? We could have altar. Right? What about if you had sex on the altar? Sex altar. Oh no, that's a bit much. So I don't even get past that. Satan's altar. Satan's altar. That's a good name for a band. There's a billion bands doing this all over the UK. And the good ones come out, right? And one of the best ones was Diamond Head. Diamond Head were writing these epic songs, these great big riffs. They've got everything going on there, a bit of prog, a bit of punk, everything. It sounded like a punk version of Gustav Holst. It's about the most English thing you could possibly have. Now, what Metallica do is they want to be heavier. They want to push it further out. And Lars Ulrich, who's quite a cosmopolitan young man, he's been around the world because his dad was a tennis player or something, I don't know, but he's not American, is he? He's been all over the place. And he spots in the UK this new wave of British heavy metal things going on. So he then toddles over to Stourbridge, just up the road, literally up the road from here, and he goes to see Diamond Head, hooks up with them, sleeps on Brian Tatler, their guitarist's floor, picks their brains, and he learns the way of British heavy metal, a new wave of British heavy metal. He learns the esoteric arts of that form of music and takes them back to America. And there they work out how to have flappy hair and denim jackets over the leather jackets and not be cool and all that type of stuff. And they learn that you don't have to have some expensive, PR firm. You don't have to have that. All you got to do is have your exercise book, pick your exercise book up like this, and then you just make a logo and just make it as spiky as a bit of chrome effect in biro and do that. And maybe you could draw, I don't know, it'll be a wolf that looks like Satan and he's carrying a woman that he's about to eat. And then we'll have that in a graveyard. There's the album cover done. Brilliant. And when the new wave of British heavy metal thing was going on, right? And I don't think I'm sure someone said this, but I've never heard anyone say this. I used to buy Kerrang, and in the back of that, they had this thing called the Encyclopedia Metallica. Now, that's a play on words because we have the Encyclopedia Britannica, but they made it into the Encyclopedia Metallica. And this is an encyclopedia of all the new wave of British heavy metal bands, right? And I wanted this encyclopedia because the new wave of British heavy metal actually attracted a lot of nerdy kids, right? And I was a nerdy kid. And the idea of me having some sort of gothic library that would, you would see someone like Peter Cushing in, and I could be smoking a pipe and go into my library and go, yes, the dark art of the new wave of British heavy metal. I do believe I have an encyclopedia here. Do you, Quinton? Yes, I do. It's over here. Let's over here. It's called the Encyclopedia Metallica. You pull out the encyclopedia, blow it off in its leather bound. That's what I imagined. This would have just been like a paperback thing. But I imagine it would have been there because I never got a copy of it. I never sent off it. And then you'd be able to go down and say, oh, look at this. Raven. Tigers of Pantang. What's this Tigers of Pantang of which you speak? The Baron Rojo, Handsome Beasts. Demon. What's Demon? Oh, and you could have studied new wave of British heavy metal lore. This is, for me, my generation, this is what rock music is. It was a club that you're in. And Metallica, they came in and they stood their ground. And anybody in the early 80s looking at a Metallica album, looking at the cover, looking at the titles or listening to it, any normal person would have felt that this was the most uncoolest thing they've ever heard in their life. But they did not care because they were representing something. They represented something that meant something, right? Every single musician of my age that I have interviewed on this, not every single one, but most of them, right? Whether they're jazz fusion musicians, prog musicians, experimental musicians, they all started in the new wave of British heavy metal. That's where it starts. It's so important to us. It's so important. If you look at my interview with Phil Alston, right, who's got a YouTube where he talks about, different albums, rock, classic rock, prog and all that. You watch that interview at the beginning, I say, what do you do? And he says, I used to play guitar in a band, and I said, what band? And he went, Handsome Beasts. Look at my reaction when I found out he played in Handsome Beasts. I mean, that album cover, that lead singer, naked in a pigsty with a big fat pig, with the title Bestiality. I mean, they don't do that anymore. And the thing is, The Warning aren't going to do that, are they? Metallica stood their ground. They stood their ground. Right? And when Master of Puppets came out, they came to Birmingham up the road from me, and they played in quite a small venue. And my best mate at the time, Matthew Bourne, he went to see them. Now, I wasn't actually a Metallica fan because it was very... back then, rock music was very tribal, right? And I decided that I liked Anthrax. I didn't like Metallica so much. I liked Anthrax of the American thrash metal bands. Because that's what we saw them like. We didn't understand the connection to the new wave of British heavy metal. We didn't see any of that. They were just these American bands come over, and they were even faster, and they were even like louder and heavier. And when the first Metallica album, when that came out in around about 1983, I think, and I heard it on Tommy Vance's Friday Rock Show, my jaw hit the floor of how heavy it was, right? But by this stage, I was being a snotty little Herbert, and so my mate Matt said, "Do you want to go and see Metallica?" And I went, "Nah, it's not really my thing, you know." And so I didn't go. So he went, and he when he got there, they all go for a drink in the pub opposite the venue. And who sat in there but Metallica with Cliff Burton? Cliff Burton got killed literally about 2 months after this show. And they sat there and they rang me up. "Andy, I'm hanging out with Metallica." "Oh, are you? Where?" "In the so-and-so pub in Birmingham. Why don't you come over?" "Nah, I'm not really into Metallica." It was one of the biggest regrets in my life, was not going over to see them. Back then, Metallica were the real deal, right? They didn't make pop videos. They didn't do any of that PR stuff. They didn't put on makeup. They just got out and rocked. And we waited and waited. They eventually bought a VHS cassette tape out of them playing live, which was the most punk thing you've ever seen. It was basically a whole bunch of really bad, video camera footage from up in the, in the audience of them playing live. It was brilliant. Right? Cliff Burton died. That was a shock. They reconvene. They get that other bloke in, Jason Newsted, is it? And they did Master of and Justice for All, waiting for that to come out. That was the peak Metallica. That was peak Metallica. And I think I might have seen them on that tour. Can't remember. I have a vague memory of going to see that tour. Maybe I didn't. I think my mate might have gone to it, and he told me about it in such vivid detail that it's imprinted on my mind. Anyway, and that was a great album. And we wait for the first single. One came out, and they'd done a pop video, but they honoured it, And then suddenly, Metallica they threw away all their values, didn't they? Not just the fact that they started to make sort of MTV type of music, middle of the road rock. They turned away from all the thrash and started to sing. And there's no Leper Messiahs anymore. They're singing about, it's more about going to bed when you're a kid and being scared of the bogeyman. And I think that's Enter Sandman. I think that's the one that these girls, The Warning, might have done. Okay? And that's where the rock sets in. And then Metallica, they're bloated. They got too much money. They don't know what to do. They do all sorts of awful things. Didn't they make an album with Lou Reed at some point? I mean, if you're doing that, it really is a sign that you've become some opulent millionaire rock star that doesn't know what the hell they're doing. They have all their, drinking problems. They go and spend a whole bunch of money in rehab. They get out of that. And eventually, 40 years later, they realise that they're a legacy act. They're the granddads of rock. And the best thing they can do is just do the best approximation that they can of Master of Puppets, which is what they've done. And now all the fans will like it. And they can go out and squeeze all that money out. But they're quite aware of who they are. They're quite aware of who they are. They are the granddads of heavy metal. Right? And so when these girls come out, like I say, they need to champion that. But these girls aren't doing that. These girls, they start up where the Black Album finished. They pick up the baton there. And they take the baton into this new world in which rock music has a completely different representation than it did than what I've just described. It's no longer the music of rebellion. It's no longer for the true outsiders. It's not uncool. It's like postmodernism has made it cool, The uncool becomes cool, You've got girls walking around with Motorhead T-shirts and Ramones T-shirts on. And they can wear Metallica. You can say you like Metallica. It's cool. Liking Metallica is cool, which has made it for real rockers like us uncool. But we're old now, you see. We're old. What we think doesn't matter. Right? Our opinions about music doesn't matter. And we sit there moaning and groaning. So, of course, when a band like The Warning comes out, we want to hold on to it. We want to hold on to the rock. Young girls. There was no young girls there in the early 80s, was there? And if they were a bit dodgy, weren't they? They didn't look like the girls in The Warning. You know, when you went up to Edwards in Birmingham, that's not my club, by the way, it was a club in Birmingham, and you went in there, it was mainly blokes, wasn't it? There were some girls in there, weren't there? There were a few. So, where does this end? I think it ends now, doesn't it? I think I've said everything I can. But when I watch The Warning, I don't get the feeling that real rock music gives me, because I still get that feeling now. They may be playing real instruments, they may sound very competent, they may be singing great songs and have some good hooks, and you may enjoy it, but really, is it the real thing? But does the real thing even exist anymore? Now, listen to a lot of the newer albums. A lot of rock music for me has been knackered up by Pro Tools. Once they got that band in, I'm not saying they can't play. I'm not saying they can't rock, but when I hear it, it's been too polished by the old Pro Tools. You can polish rock too much. I really think if rock really wants to get anywhere, it needs to get a little bit more real. Now, a few years back, I did actually go on to various rock radio stations and got to listen to a lot of the new rock that was coming out, and there was actually quite a lot of sort of quite raw sounding rock music that I quite liked. I don't know. I think that they're like this era's Nickelback. That's what The Warning are. That's why I don't like them. And I can understand someone who's like 50 years old that has grown up with the experience I've just described, finding some hope, finding some solace, and also just finding something they can bang on which they enjoy, which is well produced and is delivering what they want in a way that they want to hear it. And isn't this always the case? You know, that the music of our youth becomes the sort of middle of the road schlock of our last few years on the earth. And that's the way it is. And really, it's the sad consideration that the values that we grew up with, the aesthetic values, are now no longer mean anything. And the hope that The Warning, that there is that semblance of rebellion, of rock and roll, of sticking it to the man. You know. Where does it leave us? I don't know. But in telling the story, I think that's important. That's important. And in our documentary of rock, you know, that starts out with a video of some guy, some blues guy that nobody's interested in the 1930s, and then them being discovered in the UK in the 1960s, and then we'd have a shot to Kinks doing You Really Got Me, you know. That's our documentary, and then we go all the way through, and then we get to the 1980s, and we'd have that bit there, this proper documentary on metal, and then right at the end you have The Warning on stage, all shiny lights, all sounding not quite real, all looking amazing, and we go, there it is. There it is. The archetypal AI metal band. The embodiment of heavy metal perfection, with all the rough edges rubbed off. If you liked this video, please stick a like on it, because that helps my channel. If you want to see more of these videos, then please subscribe. Now, a few months ago, I was doing a lot of top 10 this, and I ate this, and this overrated this, and this, and this. I've had a rest for that for quite a few weeks now. I've really been doing the videos I want to do, which I feel I should be doing, you know, and I wanted to do this video. I wanted to have a talk about this, because I could talk about different things, you know, not keep talking about, you know, how much I hate bloody Van Morrison. But I will return to that. But you need to subscribe. You need to subscribe because the views are dropping at the moment, and you know, I really want to talk about proper music on here, but I've got to keep the views up. I'm talking to nobody, is there? So please subscribe. That helps me out. It doesn't cost you anything. But if you do want it to cost you something, you could become a patron. But I must admit, if you become a patron, and the link's down below, you can become a free member, and there's a whole bunch of free content. At the moment, every week I am doing a diary. And in this diary, I say what's going on in my week. It's got a whole bunch of extra content in there. They're between 3/4 of an hour long, and I'm doing one of those every single week, and that's quite fun. So you get some long form content over there. So you can become a patron. Also, I have a tip jar down below, the PayPal tip jar. You can put some money in here. And as you can see, we've got no electrics in here at all. So they're obviously panicking trying to sort that out. And if you want to help with getting the lights back on, if you look down, there's a link to the Heritage Arts Charity Trust or something like that, which is the charity behind getting this beautiful building off the ground, so we can use it for creative purposes for people in the community that are unable to access creative pursuits. And yeah, the link's down below. I think we're done now, and I'm cold and it's dark and I'm going home. I'll see you later.